the ocean dream. That's what Coral Vista Marine Park promised. A place where the wonders of the deep danced under the bright Florida sun, where families could connect with creatures they'd only seen on television, and where the line between human and animal blurred into a seamless ballet of trust and respect. Or, at least, that's the story they sold. Imagine it, the roar of the crowd, the spray of salt water, the dazzling smiles of the trainers, all amplified by booming music and vibrant lights. Children shriek with delight as dolphins leap through hoops, their sleek bodies glistening in the artificial sun. Parents snap photos, capturing the magic for their Instagram feeds. It's a carefully crafted illusion, a spectacle designed to inspire awe, and of course, open wallets. And at the heart of it all was Sophie Lane, a bright, dedicated, and some might say, overly empathetic soul. At 29, Sophie wasn't just clocking in and going through the motions. She lived and breathed the ocean dream. She had dedicated her life to marine life, starting as a volunteer at a local rescue center and working her way up to a senior trainer at Coral Vista. For Sophie, it wasn't about the tricks or the applause. It was about connection. It was about understanding the needs and respecting the boundaries of these magnificent creatures. She spent countless hours observing, learning their individual personalities, and building genuine bonds of trust. She knew their quirks, their preferences, their moods. She was fluent in the silent language of the sea. Her star pupil, the pride of Coral Vista, was a bottlenose dolphin named Eris. Sleek, intelligent, and undeniably charismatic, Eris had been performing for nearly a decade. She knew every cue, every jump, every spin. She was a natural performer, captivating audiences with her effortless grace and seemingly endless energy. Eris and Sophie, they were a team, a partnership, a symbol of the magic that Coral Vista claimed to offer. But behind the shimmering surface, cracks were beginning to appear. The relentless pressure to deliver bigger and better shows was taking its toll. The long hours, the repetitive routines, the constant noise and artificial environment were all chipping away at the well-being of the animals, and Sophie saw it. She saw the subtle changes in Eris's behavior, the slight hesitations, the moments of apparent listlessness, the lack of appetite. These were all red flags, warning signs that something was wrong. 11 shows a week. That was the new standard at Coral Vista, driven by increased tourism and the insatiable demand for entertainment. More shows meant more revenue, and revenue was all that seemed to matter to the park's management. Concerns about animal welfare were often dismissed or ignored, seen as a nuisance that got in the way of profits. Sophie raised her concerns, of course. She documented everything in her reports. She spoke up during staff meetings, her voice firm, but respectful. She pleaded for Eris to be given a break, a chance to rest and recover, but her pleas fell on deaf ears. "We have sold out shows," she was told, time and time again. "The public expects to see Eris. We can't afford to disappoint them." Victor Hale, the park's operations manager, was particularly dismissive. A man driven by numbers and deadlines, he viewed the animals as assets, resources to be exploited for maximum profit. He had little patience for Sophie's emotional arguments, seeing them as a sign of weakness. "They're animals, Sophie," he would say, rolling his eyes. "They don't feel things the way we do. They just need to be trained." But Sophie knew better. She knew that Eris was more than just a performing animal. She was a sentient being with her own needs, her own desires, her own emotions, and she was suffering. Sophie felt a growing sense of dread, a premonition that something terrible was about to happen. She knew that pushing Ares beyond her limits was a recipe for disaster, but she felt powerless to stop it. The warning signs were there, clear as day. The exhausted eyes, the hesitant movements, the growing disinterest, but they were ignored. Buried beneath the bright lights, the booming music, and the insatiable hunger for entertainment, the ocean dream was turning into a nightmare that would soon shatter, leaving behind a trail of grief, outrage, and unanswered questions. And Sophie Lane, the woman who saw it all coming, would pay the ultimate price. The stands were packed. You could feel the buzz of anticipation. In the air, a thick hum of excitement that vibrated through the very concrete of the amphitheater. The sun was high, glinting off the water, almost blinding if you weren't careful. Sophie Lane, a name synonymous with grace and dedication at Coral Vista Marine Park, stood poised on the platform, a familiar figure in her wetsuit. She gave a quick, almost imperceptible nod to the music technician, a silent cue. The music swelled. An upbeat, almost saccharine melody designed to elicit joy. It was a soundtrack so ingrained in the park's identity, everyone knew it by heart. But today, the music felt almost jarring, a too loud contrast to the unease that gnawed at the edges of Sophie's mind. Ares, the star orca, surfaced with practiced precision, sending a controlled splash over the front rows. The crowd roared its approval. To them, it was all spectacle, a seamless performance honed through years of training. They didn't see the subtle hesitation in Ares's movements, the slight droop in her usually upright dorsal fin. Only Sophie saw that. The initial routine unfolded. As planned, leaps, spins, synchronized swims. Sophie, despite her apprehension, executed each cue flawlessly, her movements a mirror of Ares's. For a brief moment, the familiar rhythm lulled her, almost convincing her that everything was all right. Almost then came the high-speed figure eight. Ares was meant to accelerate, creating a dazzling display of power and agility. But instead, she faltered. Her movements became erratic, almost clumsy. She missed the first turn, cutting the figure short, circling Sophie instead. A ripple of unease spread through the crowd. Murmurs replaced cheers. Something was off. This wasn't part of the act. Sophie, ever the professional, tried to regain control. She extended her hand, offering a fish, a gesture of reassurance, but Ares ignored it. She continued to circle, faster and faster, her tail slapping the water with increasing force. The air crackled with tension. The music, still blaring its happy tune, now seemed grotesquely inappropriate. It was like a laugh track at a funeral. Then it happened. Ares breached the water with a sudden, violent surge. Not the graceful, controlled leap the audience expected, but a raw, desperate expulsion of energy. She twisted in the air, her massive body contorting in a way that looked almost painful. The splash was immense, sending a wave that soaked the first few rows. The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath before the horror fully registered. Ares didn't resurface immediately. The water roiled, obscuring everything. Then, a flash of black and white, a glimpse of Ares beneath the surface, moving with frantic, uncontrolled energy. Sophie, ever vigilant, had instinctively backed away, trying to assess the situation. But it was too late. Ares lunged again, this time directly at the platform. The impact was brutal. Ares's rostrum, the rounded snout of the orca, slammed into Sophie's chest, knocking her off balance. Before she could react, before anyone could intervene, Eris's powerful jaws clamped down on Sophie's arm. The scream that tore from Sophie's throat was instantly swallowed by the roar of the crowd, now fully aware that this was no performance. This was a disaster unfolding in real time. Ares pulled Sophie into the water. Chaos erupted. The music cut out abruptly, leaving a void filled only with the screams of the audience and the frantic shouts of the trainers. The red emergency flag was raised, a signal of utter desperation. Underwater, a maelstrom of violence, Ares thrashed and pulled, her grip unrelenting. Sophie, despite the shock and pain, fought back, her years of training kicking in. She tried to signal to calm Ares, but her commands were lost in the churning water. The audience watched in horror, a silent, petrified mass. Children screamed and cried, clinging to their parents. Adults shielded their eyes, unable to bear. Witness to the unfolding tragedy, the seconds stretched into an eternity. Ares surfaced, Sophie's limp body still clutched in her jaws. Blood stained the water, a stark and horrifying contrast to the pristine blue. A collective gasp rose from the crowd, a wave of shock and disbelief. Then Ares dove again, dragging Sophie beneath the surface. This time, there was no struggle. When the rescue team finally managed to reach Sophie, it was too late. Her body was lifeless, her wetsuit torn, her face pale and still. CPR was administered, but there was no response. Sophie Lane was pronounced dead at 11:19. The park descended into pandemonium. The once vibrant atmosphere was replaced by a chilling silence, broken only by the sobs of the staff and the distant wail of sirens. The ocean dream had become a nightmare. News of the tragedy spread like wildfire, igniting a storm of outrage and grief. The world watched in stunned disbelief as the story of Sophie Lane's death unfolded. A stark reminder of the inherent risks of keeping intelligent, powerful creatures in captivity. The cheers were gone, replaced by a deafening silence, a silence that spoke volumes about the cost of entertainment, the price of exploitation, and the tragic loss of a life dedicated to bridging the gap between humans and the natural world. The world watched, and the world reacted. Sophie Lane's death ignited a firestorm of controversy, forcing a harsh spotlight onto the practices of Coral Vista Marine Park and the broader ethics of keeping marine mammals in captivity for entertainment. The initial shock and grief quickly morphed into outrage, amplified by the relentless churn of social media. #JusticeForSophie became a rallying cry, demanding accountability for what many saw as a preventable tragedy. The investigations began swiftly. Local law enforcement, the Department of Wildlife Welfare, and even a federal task force descended upon Coral Vista, combing through records, interviewing staff, and meticulously reviewing the events leading up to the fatal performance. The park, once a symbol of family fun, became a crime scene. Initial findings pointed to a systemic failure of oversight. Sophie's reports documenting Eris's declining health and unusual behavior were scrutinized. The security footage showing Victor Hale ordering the administration of the stimulant without proper veterinary consultation became a damning piece of evidence. The drug itself, a potent cocktail of amphetamines and corticosteroids, was revealed to be both unauthorized and potentially dangerous for marine mammals, especially those already under duress. Victor Hale, initially placed on administrative leave, was soon facing criminal charges, including negligence and animal endangerment. But the legal ramifications extended far beyond a single manager. Lawsuits were filed against Coral Vista Marine Park by Sophie's family, animal rights organizations, and even disgruntled former employees who alleged a pattern of mistreatment and disregard for animal welfare. The financial impact on the park was devastating. Ticket sales plummeted, shows were cancelled indefinitely, sponsors withdrew their support. Protests continued daily outside the gates, with activists chanting slogans and displaying graphic images of marine mammals in captivity. The park, once a thriving business, teetered on the brink of bankruptcy. But the consequences of Sophie's death rippled far beyond Coral Vista. The incident sparked a global conversation about the ethics of animal captivity and the inherent cruelty of forcing intelligent, sentient creatures to perform for human amusement. Zoos, aquariums, and marine parks around the world faced increased scrutiny and mounting pressure to reform their practices. Animal rights organizations seized the opportunity to push for legislative changes. Laws were proposed banning or restricting the use of marine mammals in entertainment, phasing out breeding programs, and strengthening regulations on animal care and welfare. The debate raged in legislatures, news outlets, and online forums, pitting animal advocates against industry lobbyists and defenders of the status quo. The tragedy also had a profound impact on the trainers themselves. Many, like Sophie, had entered the profession with a deep love and respect for marine animals, believing they could educate the public and promote conservation through entertainment. But Sophie's death shattered that illusion for many, forcing them to confront the inherent contradictions of their chosen profession. Some trainers resigned in protest, speaking out against the exploitative practices they had witnessed firsthand. Others remained, determined to advocate for change from within, pushing for better animal care, more humane training methods, and a greater emphasis on conservation and education. The profession, once seen as glamorous and rewarding, became fraught with ethical dilemmas and internal conflicts. For Aries, the future remained uncertain. Initially kept in isolation at Coral Vista, she was eventually deemed unfit for performance and transferred to a marine mammal sanctuary in the Pacific Northwest. There, she was gradually reintroduced to a more natural environment with ample space to swim, forage, and interact with other dolphins. The transition was slow and challenging, but over time, Aries began to show signs of recovery, rediscovering her natural instincts and reclaiming her wild spirit. The closure of Coral Vista seemed inevitable. The park's reputation was irreparably tarnished, its finances in ruins, and its future prospects bleak. After months of legal battles and public outcry, the owners announced their decision to permanently close the facility. The gates were locked, the tanks emptied, and the amphitheater silenced. A stark reminder of the price of prioritizing spectacle over compassion. Sophie Lane's death became a watershed moment, a catalyst for change in the way we think about and interact with marine animals. It forced us to confront the ethical implications of our entertainment choices and to question the long-held belief that animals exist solely for our amusement. The tragedy served as a wake-up call, prompting a global reckoning with the consequences of our actions and inspiring a renewed commitment to protecting the well-being of these magnificent creatures. It marked not only the end of an era at Coral Vista Marine Park, but also the beginning of a new chapter in the fight for animal rights and conservation.